Good morning, everybody. So, the good news this week, and it's so good. it's such long-awaited news that I can't think of anything else to talk about as far as the news stuff goes, right? Um, Finally, the One Range book is out. I actually put in the description here. I put links to Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and Lulu. That's exciting, right? I'll get a copy so you can see it. You can see my piano. What I've been doing this week is trying to get actually it's been more than a week. I've been trying to get a big step back and see how the books are coming out. So those are the books that we have um, physical books for. Not all of our books are published physically, uh, but the ones that we do have are there. Now this is the One Range book, and the One Range book is not an exercise book. I'll flip it so you can see. It's all text, okay? And I know, I knew before I even wrote this that probably about, how am I going to say this? I don't want to say it in the wrong way. I know that a lot of people won't want to do this. That some people don't like to read. The fact of the matter is they don't even read the text that's in the other books, right? So someone going to buy this book is going to have to be someone who. Now, here's what happens. I can tell you, a lot of times people don't read the concepts and stuff like that until something goes wrong, right? Until they start struggling, until things start. And you know what? That's probably not the best way to do it, right? If you read the books, if you read the philosophies and the strategies and stuff like that first, a lot of times you won't have those disasters later, right? It's that whole wisdom thing. Look before you leap. But yes, a lot of people, they just want to. I have another book coming out, so I have, along with, those of you who have been watching this Q&A session, you guys know that I have books coming out. A lot of them are half done, and I'm just trying to wrap them up. This was one of them. This one was completely done, and I just hadn't finished formatting it. And, I think out of all the ones that we're looking at, 1/3 of them are books like this, text. I have a book coming out on what I call the practice stages. So, like, if you want a plan that you follow, it's the same plan I teach. It's the same plan that I use with my students. If you want a plan that you follow to help you reach whatever goal it is that you want, musically speaking, let's say you're going to a contest, whether it be something like all region, all state, solo contest, stuff like that. This next text heavy book, not this book, I'm not talking about this book right now, but the next book that's all text, like this one, is going to be a strategy to help you practice your music in a way that you get the best benefits. This is why my students, so this week I had, this year, I had three physical students audition for Region Jazz. 2 of them made it. 1 of them got first chair. And this is the way this system works so well that usually when people do it, it works, right? So I'm trying to wrap that book up too. That's separate time. That one won't be available until next year, but I'm working on it every day right now. But anyway, so yeah, the other books, I'm finishing up the Trumpet Chops books. I've also got this great book coming out, hopefully by November 1st, because it's a great Christmas gift for younger students. Well, older students can use it too, but the artwork and all that is geared towards the younger students. Um, but yeah, so today, this is, it's, I say it's officially released now because it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and that's pretty much what you're looking for, right? So yeah, basically a book to help you develop your range without practicing range exercises. That's the main thing. See, and the problem is with range exercises, in my opinion, range exercises do not lead towards musical results. When you practice range exercises, what you're practicing is something that tends to be separate from music, right? It tends to be, so what you end up with are results like you can play, quote unquote, you can play the high notes. I remember for a long time ago playing with somebody. When you play, um, when you first start playing in a brass quintet, you might play the rondo amore, right, on your B flat trumpet because you don't have a piccolo yet, right? And I'll never forget this. This wasn't me. That was the other guy, and I won't say who it is because he's a real, real good friend of mine. Right? Clobber that D because it's a high note. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you have one range that covers all of that, you don't have to clobber any notes, okay, to make them come out right. No clobbering, right? Anyway, so I don't know if you can tell, I'm very excited about this. Now, the book works two different ways, and I'm not trying to turn this into an ad for the book. I'm just very excited about it. The book works two different ways. If you do not use my books, it will help you design your exercises and stuff that you do not have to buy anything else but this book, right? That's not how it's set up. I intentionally went through and worded everything in a way that you could take the concepts of this book and apply it to what you already do. Okay? If you don't want to buy my other stuff. But I'm not going to lie. The reason why I wrote this book is because I have, and there's going to be more, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 routine books, plus some other routines you can download. 2 more routines outside of these 4. 2 more coming up this year that will be published this year. That's a total of 8 books. And I get questions all the time from people that get some of these books or one of these books, and it's confusing. And that's why it's appropriate to talk about this during the Q&A, right? Because a lot of people, the whole reason why they come to the Q&A sometimes or send me questions in the email and stuff like that is because they're confused. They just don't know what to do with the books. Now, obviously, just reading the books down, like the routine, that's self-explanatory. You just play the routine, okay? But there's 7 routines. What do you do with that? And then when you add to that the fact that there's other books, right? So 2 of the books have 7 routines in them. That's 14 different routines. And people get confused. They don't know what to do with that. And the answer to the question, what do I do with that, is the One Range book. Okay. Anyway, so that's why I would, this, to me, this is great news. And like I said, I put links to the books down in the description on this video. Okay. Now, this might be a very short Q&A simply because no questions this week, not in the comments. And now there was one, let me pull up my email real quick. I got an email again from Wendell, and I'm not absolutely certain, I don't remember if there was a question in there. So let's go to Wendell's email. I wouldn't normally do it this way, but normally what I do beforehand, oh, sorry about that. What I normally do beforehand is prepare, but because the book just came out today, I had some other work I had to do. All right, so let's see here. Not going to talk about any personal stuff. That's not how I operate. So he didn't ask a question, but one thing I will respond to in Wendell's email. Wendell makes a connection between what I said in last week's Q&A and the Caruso method. Okay? And there is a connection there. Now, I do believe that for a lot of these different like trumpet philosophies of trumpet schools, I do believe there's a lot of overlap in all of them. But Wendell is absolutely correct talking about the Caruso connection. And now, here's the thing. I was introduced to the Caruso, quote unquote, the Caruso sixth note in high school. But I was doing it wrong back then. And so you can't say that my Caruso influence goes back that far. And I did buy the Caruso book long ago, and I have messed with that a little bit. But here's where the real Caruso connection comes from. And it's a little bit of a story, so just for those of you who are interested, for those who are not interested, just be patient. We'll get to your questions if you have any. I got an email in the 90s from somebody who wanted my books, but wanted to trade. He traded 2 books that he had for 2 books that I had published back then. And so I said, okay, yeah, let's do that. So he sent me the 2 books. I sent him the 2 books. And the one of the books, I'll read every trumpet book that I have the time to read. I just enjoy reading trumpet books. I think that's why a lot of people, like when I'm on the gigs, I tell you guys that I'm an introvert, and I've told you in some of the other videos that I'm the kind of guy that when I open my mouth and say something on the break at the gig, people are like, what did he just say, right? But it's because the stuff that I like is stuff that most people don't want to talk about. And I like talking about trumpet. Pardon me, but that's just what I like to do, right? I like to talk about trumpet or music or jazz or whatever. I don't want to talk about sports or girls or what people are doing or gossip. Last thing I want to do is gossip, right? Which is a shame, right? Because it's like so prevalent in our society now that we don't even call it gossip anymore. Anyway, let's not go on that topic. But anyway, so yeah, so I'll read any book that comes in. Some books seem more pointless than others, and I would say that the one book I read that this guy sent was kind of pointless. But the other book he sent was by Bob Finley. I think it's called Bob Finley on Trumpet. I still got it. I lend it out to my students. You know, that's probably not a good thing because there's so much I've lent out that never came back. But yeah, it's just a bad habit, lending stuff to my students like that. But yeah, Bob Finley on Trumpet. And just like this one range book, right? Most of it's text. Most of it is text. And he explains stuff in that book that never made sense to me before. I used to accept it as a trumpet enigma. I used to accept certain things as well, let me be more specific. I knew that the people who said the tongue arch, don't raise your tongue, were right. And I knew that the people who said, yes, do raise your tongue, I knew they were right too. You know, there's people out there that whenever there's differences, and this just shows shallow thinking, right? There's people out there that can't think. And that's not don't be offended by this. Sometimes in certain circumstances, shallow thinking is better thinking. But when it comes to stuff like this, it's not better, right? So there's a lot of shallow thinkers out there that think that everybody who plays well plays the same way. And that's just ignorant. There are different ways to play the trumpet. Okay? It's just ignorant to think that everybody that does it well does it the same way. Oh, great, Tony. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. I'm glad you bought. I hope you like the book. If you have any questions ever, just let me know. So anyway, reading Bob Finley's book made me understand why one person raising their tongue arch can be correct for that person, and the other person not raising their tongue arch can be correct for that person. Before I read the Bob Finley book, I just accepted it as an enigma. So, so where am I going from here? What am I saying? Let me get. Oh, talking about the Caruso connection. That was probably one of the most influential books in my whole trumpet career. And when I saw somewhere online Bob Finley's email address, I just had to email him on the chance that maybe he might pick it up and answer me. I just had to send him an email, tell him how much I appreciated his book and how much of a difference it made. You know, rarely do you ever just read something and the next day you're a better player. But I'm not exaggerating. I had a late gig Friday night. The book was on the table, had come in the mail. When I got home, it was on the table. I read it that night. I had a gig at noon the next day, and I was a better player for reading that book. And rarely do you ever have something. I'm not saying that will happen for everybody else. It just happened that something I was doing wrong physically, he explained in the book, and I could start doing it correctly like that instantly. So that's something that hardly ever happens. Usually the physical stuff, you have to work on it at least for a while before it even starts to work properly. When I read that book, it was instant. I just reading the words, not practicing a thing. I didn't practice anything, and instantly my trumpet playing was better. One day maybe I'll spend some time talking about that. So I send this email to Bob Finley, and Bob Finley tells me, well, wouldn't Carmine, he says, if Carmine was, Carmine is Caruso, Carmine Caruso, right? He says, wouldn't Carmine be smiling right now if he knew how well this worked for you? In other words, what he's saying is that wasn't his method. That was Carmine Caruso's method that he was sharing in his book. He took, basically in the email, he took no credit for it. And you know what? My appreciation for Bob Finley, like I was already like in awe, right? But it went even farther when he wouldn't take credit, right? So there is a very, very strong, in the way I approach things, there is a very strong indirect Caruso connection. And it wouldn't be, if it wasn't for Bob Finley, I don't think I would understand a lot of the stuff that I understand today at the level that I understand it. I hope that makes sense. And I'll tell you the truth also. The Caruso book. Now, to me, I think all of you should buy all of the books that are out there. The only problem is the money, right? It just costs so much to buy all that. That's the only reason I kind of slowed down on buying money and space. Right? After a while, you end up not having room for all of it. But yeah, and even though I would like for you all to buy the Caruso book and all the other books out there, I don't think that the Caruso book does the philosophy part of it justice. That's just my opinion. Some of you that are more Caruso, and by the way, I do not consider myself a Caruso person. Now, here's the weird thing about this stuff is that each one of these little schools that they have, the Caruso school, the Reinhardt school, the Maggio school, I don't think those original people, Caruso, Reinhardt, Maggio, or Clark Gordon, right? I don't think any of those guys were this way, but their students have turned a lot of these trumpet schools into religions, and they are extremely zealous about their religion. The same thing is true, by the way, for the Chicago stuff, the Song and Wind, the Arnold Jacobs, and all that stuff. It's like little music religions. And anybody that comes out, I got severely criticized one time, and I don't remember which of these schools I compared my books to. It might have been Caruso. I don't remember. But someone went on a cancel culture campaign long before there was such a thing as cancel culture. Started bad-mouthing me and my books and stuff like that, just because I said something that was not in alignment with what they think about that particular school of trumpet playing. So at this point, I have to say that all of this stuff has turned to mush inside of my head, and what has come out is a new school. And I'll tell you what I would like is for the students to read this stuff. Hey, Jordan Scanlon. Well, I'll answer that in a second, okay? Very good. That's a good question. All right, so yes, I don't want to associate with any of those schools because I don't like the religious attitude that goes with those schools. And for that matter, I don't want anyone adopting that kind of religious attitude about my materials either. Okay? And you know what? Some of the people who go through this and say, who talk against this religious stuff, and I'm using the word religious as in, almost cult-like, right? I don't mean religious as in Christian. I mean religious as in they turned that little trumpet school into a cult. And I pray that that never happens with my stuff. Um, you know what? I'm not even an authority on my material because my material, where my head is, changes over time. There's people from when I was first teaching that think they know my way, and I that's 40 years ago. So no, nobody has the authority to speak on my behalf. I don't want that, and I don't even have the authority to speak on my behalf. Because I mean, I could have said something 10 years ago that totally contradicts what I'm saying today, right? Anyway, let's answer Jordan's question. How long do you recommend someone to rest after a brutal gig and they are having trouble getting notes out the next day? So I think there's two different kinds of brutal gig, two different kinds of quote unquote damage that you can do. All right. I've been preparing for uh, a recital that is 6 days away from today, and it's a recital that is what do you call it? Just very very long and hard. Trumpet trios and solos. I'm sharing the recital with two other trumpet players, but we're playing trios along the same time. And when I was practicing, because I'm trying to build up my endurance, for those of you who didn't hear last week's, those of you who didn't hear last week's, I'm dealing with some endurance issues right now because of I think it's from the weight loss. It could be from my blood pressure being down again, but I've lost over 40 pounds since the first of the year, and I'm just having trouble even standing up for a long time, right? If I practice a whole hour, by the end of the hour, I can barely stand erect. So I'm forcing myself to work on the endurance right now and work on the music at the same time and stuff like that, right? And um, and I started to get, because I have these teeth, right, that can cut into my lips, and I started to get a uh, uh, a cut on the inside of my lip from practicing so hard, preparing for this recital. And that's when you want to just stop. The problem is, if you're a pro and you're on the gig and you're that tired and you just have to keep going. I don't believe, I think it's actually wrong to uh, to not do the job, regardless of what. So, in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes what Jordan is asking goes to the point where you actually cause stuff to like cut and actually even bleed. I've had gigs where blood was coming through my horn. Now, when you have something like that, you have to take off enough time so that the tissues can heal, at least well enough so you don't at least not bleed anymore. I've been following some threads on Facebook about these guys doing some stuff, and it's kind of machismo stuff, right? Real machismo attitude about endurance and range and stuff like that. And these guys are like foolish. Foolish. There's so many trumpet players that was the end of their career. That was it. It was over. You do that kind of damage to your lip, and then you keep playing and keep going and keep going. All right? That's career ending. Not every time. It doesn't happen every time. And that's why it's so easy to flirt with that, right? Because it doesn't end your career every time. But then just that one time. See, anytime you open up the tissue, that's a problem. All kinds of bad stuff can happen with that. All right. So with that, you want to take as much time off as it takes to get healed up. If it's muscular, I don't think necessarily time off is the answer. What I use is what I call range limiting. So let's say the next day, let's say you have a day where you just played so much that like what you're saying, the notes won't even come out the next day because the muscles are swollen, the lips are swollen, everything's just bad, right? Then make yourself only play up to tuning note C. Just nothing higher than tuning note C. Now, here's the thing. Some people would say play long and slow up to tuning note C. My question is, why weren't you playing long and slow to begin with, right? Why should that be any different from the way you're practicing anyway? Right? So, no, I don't think you should play any longer or slower than what you were practicing already. The exception to that is if you are one of those panicky practicers that practices everything too fast anyway, then yes, you want to practice long and slow and only up to tuning note C. Okay? Long and slow. That's the one thing I would recommend. The more time you spend practicing slow, it's almost like having a lip massage. And it flushes all of that bad stuff out of your muscles, out of your lips. So to me, I wouldn't just take a day off. Now, I believe in taking a day off. Let's not get these two things confused, right? And it just happens that my day off is Sunday. So a lot of times I'll have a brutal gig like that. And then Sunday I'll take the day off, but not because I had a brutal gig. I'll take Sunday off because that's when that's my day for taking off the trumpet. And if I have a Sunday gig, I'll take Monday off sometimes. Depends on the gig. If I'm just playing like a regular church gig, I probably won't take Monday off. I'll still consider that a day off. Okay. But yes, let's say my brutal gig was on Friday night and I wouldn't take Saturday off. I would limit my range. Now, my system, I'm already playing down to E. I use this range limiting all the time. That's weird, right? I don't think a lot of people teach this. In fact, I don't know anybody that does. I have a range limit schedule throughout the week, and it goes up and down depending on the day. Right? Wendell, in this next question I'm going to answer for Wendell, he's talking about his hard day. On the hard day, I don't necessarily use range limits. But all the other days of the week. So how many days? 5 days of the week, I limit my range. So let's say I have a tough gig on Friday night. I'm only going to play up to E, fourth space E, on Saturday anyway. And I'll tell you what, if you follow this range limiting, like the schedule that I'm talking about, it's a schedule that I outline in my Chops Express book. If you follow this schedule, you don't have as many brutal gigs anymore. Okay, it's I know that sounds like another advertisement. Everything I say sounds like an advertisement. It's because the stuff that I do, it's all for sale, right? So, um, but yes, we want to do the range limiting, and you'll have less brutal gigs. I'm not saying all of them will go away. I've had recently. I think it's because of this endurance thing that I'm going through right now. Um, and by the way, it's not as bad now as it was like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Even though I'm still losing more weight, I'm pushing myself more on the endurance stuff, and it's kind of compensating for that. Okay, so yes, if the damage that if the brutal effect is on the muscular stuff, then I don't take a day off at all, except for what I already do. All right, the range limiting should fix that. All right. Anyway, let's talk about Wendell's question. His hard day is now routine 3. Did it yesterday for an hour. Several hours later, intended to do 4 15-minute music sessions. Okay, only did 2 because of response was weak. Yes, continue. On the day that you do your hardest day, don't worry about response. Okay? So this that we talked about last time about pushing through, that applies to your music practice as well. It applies to the music practice as well. It's very important, actually. What we're trying to do. Okay, so yeah, we'll address that in a second. What we want to try to do is become sort of like, what do you call it? What's that old book from about 150 years ago? The horror book. I read it. I read the original. It's not very horrible. The thought of it, right? Like the worst thing the guy does is push some little girl over. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? We want our personality to change. We want to be a different person on one day than we are from the other day. On the day that we're pushing it, we're Mr. Hyde. We're the jerk that pushes the little girl over. And I'm not saying to do that, right? But yes, we want to be more aggressive and care less about, as long as you're not doing any, like what we were talking about earlier, about splitting, as long as you're not cutting stuff up inside of, no ruptures and nothing like that, as long as you're not causing damage to the tissues, we push through that on that day. The attitude we have is more of that Mr. Hyde attitude that's not concerned about those things. Okay, what I like to do, what I just said a little earlier, that when you're on the gig and you're getting paid, you don't have a choice. You have to push through because they're paying you to be there to do that. So on those days when I'm doing this, I pretend I'm on the gig. That's the attitude I have. In fact, I never put it that way in public before, but that's a great way to put it, right? Because you know what that does? When you think of it as you're on the gig, not only do you have to push through, but also, because here's where I have trouble with the students, right? I tell them to push through. They push through. And just like you're asking, you said my response was weak. And you're saying continue anyway. And the answer is yes, but I think sometimes the students misinterpret that as saying it's okay to get a bad sound. It's okay to have split entrances, right? Cracked notes and stuff like that. And it's not ever okay. And when we look at it as that on that day, it's as if we're on a gig. That forces you to have that attitude that even though I'm very, very far from the mark, even though what I'm putting out is so, so far from what it should be, that's still what I'm striving for. And you know what? That's an amazing thing. I've seen it in my life. It's an amazing thing. And you know, I like to use the long distance running as an example. I get tired and I can't hold myself up. And yet you have these other guys that are up, you know, they're holding, and you can see that they're more tired than I am. And what my point is that, you know, a lot of people talk about endurance and they talk about it all completely wrong. They talk as if endurance is something that you just don't feel tired. And that's not the truth. Endurance isn't just about not feeling tired. There's a second half. You know, I have this thing that I call the other side of endurance. And that's doing a great job even when you feel tired. And when are you going to be able to work on that if you never let yourself become tired? Right? I hope that makes sense. If you want to work on your endurance, then you have to push past that point of fatigue and still hold yourself to that quality level that you expect yourself to perform at. That's what true endurance is all about, is doing a professional level job even when your lips are screaming for you to stop. That's endurance. People who just say, well, they don't, and you know what, I'm one of those guys that people accuse me of never getting tired. And the reason why they say that is because I never sound tired on the gigs. But that's because I never allow myself to sound tired. And I have all these years now, decades of practicing not sounding tired when I'm tired. It's almost the opposite of what other people teach, right? There's a lot of other people who teach that you should never, ever, ever be tired. And they say, I've heard people say this before, that if you practice tired, that you will always sound tired whether you're tired or not. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. It's the complete opposite. I believe you have to reach that point of fatigue on your hard day. Okay? The other days we want to become Dr. Jekyll. Okay? But on your hard day, you push through. And you make yourself play at a professional level even though you can't. Then, when you go on the gig, I'll tell you what, you start doing my daily routines. Once you get to the group 5, group 3 is good too. You know, the problem with the daily routines book is group 3 is disproportionate. I found that out after it was already published. Okay, group 3 is too long compared to the others. It's not, you know, the other ones progress pretty evenly. Group 3 is, as you said, it's like an hour long. And I think group 4 is not an hour long. So it's disproportionate. It's the best routine in the book, in my opinion. I love doing group 3. Even today, I'll go back and do that routine again. Today I'm using the new ones. The next book coming out, by the way, Wendell, is is the one that replaces routine 3 in the book. And I have a proof copy coming in the mail. It should be in the mail I should get it here on Wednesday. If there's nothing that needs to be fixed, it'll be on Amazon within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So very excited about that book too. But that said, I still enjoy going back to the routine you're doing now because it's fun. That particular routine is more fun than the rest of them, in my opinion. So anyway, let me get on to Scanlon's thing. He's talking about stuff when the lips start to split. That's a serious problem. That's what I was saying earlier. And this goes, I just realized I never finished the analogy between the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde stuff. I believe you're supposed to do both. There's a school of thought out there. It's less popular today, but they're still out there. It's the no pain, no gain school, right? Where you push through, push through, push through, push through. And that's all you do ever, okay? And then there's the guys that are, you could say so much derogatory stuff about them, but I'm not going to do that. But there is a problem with that because the always play fresh school. But it always seemed very I'm trying not to be derogatory, but the always play fresh school, never play tired school. I don't know how to describe it without being derogatory. But it reminds me of you see those movies. You see movies where there's mama's boys, men that never grew up to be men, that kind of thing. And that's what that never play tired school reminds me of. It's like they never really fully crossed that line into like going for it, and that's how, but the thing is we have to take from both of those schools to get the stuff that I'm talking about. The on the other side, the people that just go for it all the time, there's derogatory stuff for that too. Okay. I've heard people refer to them as meatheads and stuff like that. And in the analogy that I used with the mama's boy thing, these would be the jocks, right? And what we want is a mixture of those two. The jocks are like the Mr. Hyde, and the mama's boys are like Dr. Jekyll. Okay? And we have that day that we go for it like the jocks, but then we have these other days where we do the range limiting. And we are just as careful as those guys that were that I'm talking about that remind me of mama's voice. Right? Okay. I know that sounds really, that's probably someone's gonna find this and have a fit over what I just said. But that's how I see this stuff. Whenever you have extremes on stuff like this, the extremes are there's always something wrong with it. So what we're trying to do is take the wisdom of the meathead school and the wisdom of the mama's boy school and take the best of both worlds, use to our advantage the best qualities of both sides. That's what my system does. That's what, by the way, that's what the one range book does. Okay? It helps you figure out how to do that. All right. So when we're talking about the physical damage, that's an entirely different thing. You know, what happens if you keep playing on that? There's a chance for infection. Now, is it, you know, I just read an article about this little girl that died because she got an amoeba when she went swimming in one of the rivers in Texas, right? Now, what's the chance of getting an amoeba when you're swimming in the, you know, people swim in that water all the time. And the article even said is that that amoeba is common in all of the waters in below the Dixie line, right? The Mason-Dixon line. Okay, so that's just normal. But that said, you know, there are precautions you should take. Like, you know, they said, even though the likelihood is not, it's not very likely that you get that amoeba that goes and eats your brain or whatever it is. It's not likely, but it's dumb not to take precautions, right? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So that's why they use those nose plugs. I always thought the nose plugs thing was stupid, but now that I know that there's amoebas in the water that can eat your brain, the nose plug thing sounds pretty good now. I grew up like that, right? If there was a body of water, my family, we all jumped in it. We were like that. We loved it. You know, I've swum in all kinds of different water all over the country. Mostly on the East Coast, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and beaches, of course. We've swum in beaches all over the world. Anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with Trumpet, but that's why I'm using the swimming analogy, because, you know, all those years that we swam in that water, nothing happened. So I'm not saying that every time you cut something like this open that you're going to have some terrible, you know, infection or something. But for as long as it is open, the chance for the infection increases. So you want to stop playing long enough for the splits to heal up. Now, there's a difference if it's split on the inside. If you're split on the outside, what you do about it is a little different, because a lot of times you're split on the outside because of chapped lips and stuff like that. So you want to do whatever it is that you do for chapped lips. If you don't do anything for chapped lips, better do something about that. Okay? So now, if Jordan, if you're still here, is the split on the outside or the inside? So what I was describing earlier, what happens to me is on the inside because of my teeth the way they are. And I could tell on Thursday this week, I was real close to that cutting open, and I stopped at that point. So inside, yeah. So yeah, that's the stuff that gets infected so bad. So you want that to heal before you play again. Now here's the thing. So you said gig. Are you a pro? Were you playing professionally? Were you getting paid for the gig the night before? If you're a pro and you have a gig tonight, you got to play the gig, and that's my opinion. Unless it's like so bad you can't play at all. But if you're a pro and you have a gig tonight, then you have to play the gig, in my opinion. But if it's just like marching band, if you're a high school student and your gig last night was marching band, then that's a whole different story. But that's why the pros, if you're a professional player, not letting this happen again is the most important thing. You have to have chops enough to do the gig. And you know what? Sometimes it's not your chops. Sometimes it's the sound level on the gig. If you play a gig with them, you know what? And I'm at a place in my career right now, and this is hard for me because one of the things I was known for, and it's amazing to me how quickly you can be forgotten. But one of the things I was known for was how high and loud I could play and keep going. Like those three things together, right? I could play high, I could play loud, and I could do it all night. And I'm at a place right now, I just don't want to do that anymore. It's hard for me because it's sort of a pride thing, because that's like one of the only things as a trumpet player that anyone could actually appreciate, right? But here I'm saying, you know what, that thing that you like so much, I don't want to give it to you anymore, right? And it's not when I say a pride thing, I don't mean, what am I saying? Because that makes me sound like a really disgusting person. It's not what it sounds like. I shouldn't have probably said it that way, but it's like, because I guess the pride part of it is knowing that I'm not going to get any more gigs with those kind of bands. I shouldn't have said it that way either. I get gigs, and that's the thing. As a Christian, I believe that the other gigs will come when I do what's right. And I don't. The last time I had a loud gig, I've got 3 more gigs with this band, and they promised me they weren't a loud band. And I got on the gig, and I'm like, I don't know how they measure what's loud and what's not loud, but to me, that's a really, really loud gig. And I'm just not going to play those gigs anymore. And it's, like I said, it's hard for me because, okay, now I have the best way to put that. It's the pride side of it that I was talking about. The way I see myself is that I do what the gig calls for. I go for it. And I was proud of that. I was proud of that, being able to do, even if I didn't like the gig. I mean, that makes it more. I was proud of the fact that I could even, there's this band that I used to play with, and I was asking the band leaders for some kind words about me that I could put on my website. And the one guy he's like the best band leader I've ever worked for. He says what he likes most about me is that it doesn't matter what kind of music it is, I still have utmost respect for it. And that's like the best compliment a leader ever gave me. So when I say that it's hard for me because of my pride, I'm not saying that I have this pride that people think I can play high and loud. That's not it. It's the pride that says I can do stuff even when I don't like it. And I never liked doing the high loud stuff. Anyway, so the reason I brought this up is because talking about the loud gigs, I have more than my share of loud playing behind me. And there's an art to playing those gigs so that it doesn't damage you. And this is something I also got out of the Bob Finley book. You have to play by feel, not by sound, because you're not going to hear what's coming out of your bell. I have decades of experience doing this now. If it's a loud gig, you don't You just, because you know, after you've been doing this long enough, you can feel each of the notes. You can feel what this feels like. You can feel the everything in your body. In fact, you know, this is what I consider playing by ear now, right? That's bizarre, isn't it? Because that feel now that I have for each one of the notes, and each one of the notes at each different volume is connected now to what I hear. Now you take this away to where I can't hear it, I can still produce the feel, which produces the right notes. So even when you can't hear yourself, but here's where people get the lips that split like this, is they can't hear themselves. They push too hard. It makes them tired too soon, and then they start using pressure to get the notes. Okay? And that's when the lips start to split. There's other things that can cause it too, but if you use the word gig, right? And so it sounds like you're a professional. Brutal gig is the wording that a pro would use. You know, Friday night gig, get home, oh, I just had a brutal gig. That sounds like professional language. Okay? Um, and that's in my anecdotal experience, that's what leads to those split lips. Is when you can't hear yourself, and the way they EQ all these bands, the way they mix everything, trumpet players, it's most common that you can't hear yourself. And when you can't hear yourself, you over adjust by blowing too loud, and you get. I know I said all this already. I'm just letting it sink in. You play too loud because you can't hear yourself. That means you get tired too fast. And when you get tired, you start using mouthpiece pressure. Okay? Now, there are ways to avoid that. There are ways to not get so tired so fast. One of them has to do with this rotation thing that we're talking about, where you have different days. One day you go for it, and then the other day you're Dr. Jekyll. Right? You know, a lot of people say Dr. Jekyll, they think he's the bad guy. Dr. Jekyll isn't the bad guy. Dr. Jekyll is the very polite, overly polite. He's so polite, if you read the original book, he's so polite that he loathes himself. He hates himself because everybody stomps all over him. Right? So he creates this concoction that he drinks, and it turns him into this monster, Mr. Hyde. And so yeah, we want to be more genteel most of the days of the week. But then on that one day, we want to push ourselves farther than what we get pushed on a gig. Okay? Anyway, we're over an hour now. I do have a student coming in. And if there are any short questions I can answer right now, go ahead and ask. By the way, before I sign off, and I don't know if Wendell is still listening, if maybe he will come back. If he's not listening, and listen to it later. But Wendell, I want to tell you that it's an honor for me to be communicating with you, right? You have so much experience with these great musicians. Each time you tell me in an email some of the people that you've interacted with and stuff like that, I'm very impressed. So it's an honor to me to be interacting with you this way through email and then here on the chat. You know, it's not every day you get to talk to somebody who actually took lessons with the people that you've taken lesson with. I won't name drop, but yes, I'm very impressed and honored. I shouldn't have said impressed, but you know what I mean. I'm very, very honored to be talking to you in this context. So Anyway, all right. If no other questions, then we will wrap this one up. God bless all you guys, and thanks for hanging out with me. And we'll do this again next week. Next week will be after my recital. So we'll see how that goes. I'm very excited about it. Um, the only thing is that my endurance has been a challenge lately. And but if you know how I am, I've been going after it, and that excites me. That's something I'm very excited about. So I haven't had this kind of challenge in a long, long, long time, right? So I'm very excited about it. And the song that I'm playing, I'm playing two pieces by myself. Well, I mean, one by myself and one with a piano. Um, but I'm doing one that that I just love, and most people don't know it. And I'm very. This will be my first time performing it in public, and it's a sonatina, French piece. But yeah, it's very, very nice, and I'm looking forward to doing it along with some of my trios. We're doing trios on the recital. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week, and thanks for hanging out. Bye.